Yeah, I'll just get into some linear algebra definitions first. And these vary slightly from what you might be used to because, yeah, it generally helps with how we work with the graphs. So, first, like you might be used to the definition of a matrix just being a, 2 by 2 matrix, like, sorry, an n by n grid, and n by m in general with numbers at different places. So, what you can do is change the index set, you know. So, for example, generally I map some number here to a row position and a column position. What I can do instead is map each number to some pair. So here I'll like map it to the location 1 1. You can in general just map it to some element ij where both I and s are in some set j, are in some set s. And then you can just again define matrix multiplication as you normally do. For example, here you might define it as this, where these are numbers between n and m, but in general you can just replace it with an arbitrary set. Okay, so what we I'll again give just a short definition of what an eigenvalue and eigenvector are. So if you have some matrix, say let it be 2001, you would define a eigenvector to be some vector v such that this is equal to some lambda v, where lambda is some number. So for example, your 2001, and you take this, you multiply it out, you'll see that this is equal to 2 comma 0, and this is again equals to. So it's just the same vector which is scaled up. And you can then again just generalize this. And what you can further prove is that if you have two vectors which have the same eigenvalue, so you have the relations mv is equal to lambda v, and you have mw is equal to lambda w, then any of the linear combination a v plus bw will satisfy the same property. And just here's the short reason for it. Okay, now this bit is
But
generally,
but this
yeah, sure, go ahead.
eigenvalue might depend on v also. Like if the v is
Yep,
different,
yep.
then
Hmm. So for each eigenvalue, you have some eigenvector associated with it. And conversely, for each eigenvector, you have an eigenvalue. So different vectors can have this eigenvalue to be different. So for example, here you have 1 0. If 1 0 is your vector, then this eigenvalue is 2. But again, if you consider this is equal to 0 1. So your eigenvalue will be 1 rather than 2. So yeah, a matrix can have multiple eigenvalues, and these all of them need not be equal.
and like will this set of all lambdas as v value, will it be the set of all real numbers or something else depending on n?
No, no. So you actually have a result that if you have an n by n matrix, then there can be at most n different eigenvalues. So yeah, it can be some set of n real numbers. Now, an important thing is, conversely, it's not guaranteed that you'll always have exactly n eigenvalues. So there can be some matrices which don't have any real eigenvalue, but they will then have complex eigenvalues. So we just won't deal with complex eigenvalues here.
What do
No,
you mean by
again,
complex eigenvalues?
hmm, it is. So what you can do is, I generally just worked with real numbers here. I could easily just replace this r with a c, and then again, this definition still makes perfect sense. I just replace this with a complex value. So I could have something like, say, I0 to be a vector, and then this will have some I, and then this might get mapped to -1 0, and I then might be a complex eigenvalue. So Yeah, this is pretty unrelated to what we'll do here. So you don't really need to worry about complex eigenvalues. Uh, just note here, T here refers to a transpose of a matrix. So T0, oh, bad example. So this, its transpose is just you flip it along the diagonal. This is your transpose of T. Similarly, if you have some vector 1, 0, its transpose will be just you flip it along the diagonal, you get 1, 0. Now you define your Rayleigh quotient as you have a vector x, you have some matrix M, and then you multiply this vector, this matrix by this vector, then you multiply this vector you get by another vector. And you can check that this will actually always be a 1 by 1 matrix. So it makes sense to divide by some value. And this again is just the transpose into the original vector. And this is actually just the dot product you're familiar with. So if you consider xy and xy, this is nothing but x squared plus y squared. So this is just the dot product with itself.
I didn't get that one by one thing you mentioned. Like, if the numerator is a one by one matrix,
Ha,
then what?
yeah. So the thing is, for matrices, division isn't necessarily defined. It doesn't make sense to talk about division always. So, but again, if this is a one by one matrix, this is a one by one matrix. As long as it's not zero, you can just treat division as division by a real number.
But the below thing was like is it is x squared plus y squared. So x squared plus y squared is not a matrix. It's like a number. So
Uh, yeah, you can actually just think of this as a matrix which is one by one.
like what does it mean to divide like a one by one matrix is?
Yeah, so it's the exact same as a real number. Just because it's a one by one matrix, you can treat it as a real number.
And why is the numerator always a one by one matrix?
Simply because of how matrix multiplication works. So, like, for example, I defined back here. Now, if, hmm, yeah, so I defined it back here to be in this manner. So, if you consider any matrix x1, x2, xn, and you consider this, if you multiply the transpose, these two get multiplied, these two get multiplied, these two get multiplied, and you just sum over all these values. Ran out of space, but this is just because how you define matrix multiplication. So if you have say 1 by n vector, then if you multiply it with its transpose, then you will get a 1 by 1 matrix.
So do you know a good source for all this linear algebra stuff like?
Oh, yeah. So for linear algebra, I personally like linear algebra done right. It's the I can just I'll send it in the chat later if you want the name. But there's some other good sources. Like I generally prefer thinking of it in abstract terms, so I prefer linear algebra done right. But you might prefer in a geometrical manner, so you might like Strang's book. But yeah, I'll just send these links. So yeah, so the reason we introduced this Rayleigh coefficient is how it is related to eigenvalues. So consider x to be some eigenvector. So you have mx is equal to lambda x. Then in that case, this Rayleigh quotient will just be lambda. And the reason for this is just simple multiplication. It's just playing around with the rules. So mx will be lambda x because that's how you defined x. Then divide by x dx. Just pull out this constant x dx, x dx, and you just cancel out and you get lambda back. So that's cool. And yeah, okay. So after this, we'll be done with the linear algebra definition. We might come back to them if it gets confusing later on. But yeah, so as I stated earlier, whenever you have a matrix, an n by n matrix, there you can have at most n eigenvalues. And I said earlier that it's not guaranteed that uh, a matrix will always have exactly n eigenvalues. So now in the very specific case where uh, in the very specific case where this matrix is symmetric, with what that means is the values are the same across the diagonal. So for example, 2 minus 1, 1, 0 is not symmetric because 1 is minus 1 is not 1. But 2, 1, 1, 0 is symmetric because again the values across the diagonal are the same. And uh, for the rest of this talk, we'll only work with symmetric matrices. So you actually have this really nice result in linear algebra. And it's like hard to, and when I just say it out loud that it's a very nice result, it's hard to really motivate the fact that it's a nice result without uh, delving into deep linear algebra. But you actually have this nice result that if you have a real symmetric matrix, then it will always have n eigenvalues. And on top of that, the associated eigenvectors will be orthogonal. Here by orthogonal, I mean their dot product will be zero. So you'll so if A is some real symmetric matrix, you'll you will have vectors x1, x2, xn such that all of their dot products are zero as long as I is not j. And on top of that, axi is equal to lambda I into xi for some lambda I in real numbers.
But why is
So
the xi unique? Like xi
xi is
might have
not
two
unique.
values.
Exactly. Xi is not really unique. But whatever way you choose these xi's, this orthogonal result will always be true. And you will get lambda I distinct. Not necessarily distinct. You will get lambda I eigenvalues.
So is the claim that for a fixed value of lambda I, there are exactly n value of xi, or what is the claim?
No, no, no. So there are xi vectors. All of them are eigenvectors. And this lambda I is just you'll have n different lambda I.
So are you claiming that any two such xi are orthogonal?
Yes. So this is an existence result. So what you have is you have x1, x2, xn different vectors. All of these vectors will satisfy the property that the dot product is zero as long as their dot product is zero. On top of that, they are guaranteed to be orthogonal. Sorry, sorry, yeah. On top of that, they are guaranteed to be eigenvectors. So yeah, that's basically the result. And
No, but
I'll
suppose
Mhm.
why are there only n of these x? Like there can be a x of n plus 1 because we know that for lambda 1 there can be another x1 like xi.
Yeah. But the thing is, if you have more than n plus one, their orthogonality will no longer be guaranteed.
So
You
suppose for lambda 1 we have two value of x1, then will those two value of x1 be orthogonal or not?
They will be.
Then
Uh,
the
no, no. So there's this thing called multiplicity in for eigenvalues, and what that means is the number of vectors which satisfy lambda x, and the number of such vectors such that you can't get each other by yeah, I'm not sure how exactly to explain right now. We actually won't need the full power of this result until much later, so it might be easier to explain later. So all you really need to know is that you what this result guarantees is there will be n different eigenvalues.
No, actually, the definition of linearly independent is fine. So maybe you
Mhm.
can say
Yeah,
tell
that's
that.
yeah. I'm not entirely sure if I can just say linearly dependent. Uh, yeah, I'll just come back to it later
Okay.
because you won't need it for a bit. Okay, now we actually start relating stuff to graphs. So say you have some graph G, which has these vertices V and the edges E. You define this adjacency matrix to be one if the vertices have an edge between them, zero otherwise. So for example, you have this graph 1, 2, 3, and you consider this matrix. Then 1 and 2 are joined, so you'll have a 1 here. 2 and 3 are joined, so you'll have a 1 here. And again, 2 and 1 are joined, so you'll have a 1 here. 3 and 2 are joined, you'll have 1 here. And the rest of the values will be 0. So this is what you call the adjacency matrix of the graph. And so for a graph, the number of edges which are connected to the node is called the degree of that node. So for example, two edges here are on top of two. So the degree of this node is 2, the degree of this node is 1, and the degree of this node is 1. You define the degree matrix to be then these degree values on the diagonal. So 1 to 1, and everything else is 0. So that's how we define the adjacency and degree matrices. And yeah, we'll use them later on. And for now, we'll define another matrix, the Laplacian, in terms of these two matrices. So what you simply do is find the degree matrix. So it was 1, 2, 0, 1 for the previous case. So you have 1, 2, 3 for this graph minus the adjacency matrix 0, 1, 0, which is nothing but 1 minus 1, 0, minus 1, 2, minus 1, 0, minus 1, 1. Yeah. So this will be the Laplacian of this graph. You might have seen the Laplacian in terms of uh, Kirchhoff tree theorem, but if you haven't, then just forget about it. So yeah, these are just definitions, and yeah, it won't really help much. Now we'll get to one of the property that makes Laplacian useful. So if you take the Laplacian and multiply its right side by, and then you multiply some vector x with it, and then you multiply the transpose of this vector, you get this sum. Uh,
What do you mean by x of u? Like,
so again, yeah, I'll go back here. So what I defined was in terms of some index set. So what you do is you define the index set to be the set of vertices. So each vertex has some value associated with it in the vector. So for example, you might have a -1 here, a 0 here, a 4 here. Then a vector will be -1, 0, 4. And then if you call this x, I'll say x1 is equal to -1. I'll call x2 to be 0 and x3 to be 4.
So it is just basically a random function.
Yeah, yeah, you can treat it as a function from the set of vertices to real numbers. So like I could even have minus 1.1 here or pi here.
But in the formula you showed, the right hand side is like a real number while the left hand side is a matrix. So
You'll notice that the right left hand side is a one by one matrix. So this is a one by one matrix. Like I'll just do an explicit computation to make it clear. So for example, you have, I'll just, I'll just work with this matrix. You have this matrix 1, minus 1, 0, minus 1, 2, minus 1, and 0, minus 1, 1. Now I multiply x, y, z. What you get is x minus y minus x plus 2y plus z. Oh, sorry, minus z minus z and minus y plus z. And then I multiply this.
no, but you have to multiply this matrix by transpose of x, right?
Yep. So yeah, so this is the transpose of this matrix
Oh,
that we're multiplying. Now I'll just multiply again, and this will become x into x minus y plus y minus x plus 2y minus z plus z into minus y plus z. And again, you'll notice that this is one by one. So I can generally equate such a one by one matrix with a real number. Hmm, I think I'll add the page in here. Yeah, so coming back here, you actually have this. If you multiply it out and say x is equal to, yeah, no, you just multiply it out, you will get that this matrix is summation of u in v over summation v in u xu xv. Now, if you look at how we defined
what is
the,
L of u comma v?
yeah, again, this is sort of why I defined the matrix in this manner in terms of an index set. So, as I said earlier, you have generally you associated with a matrix has some number at some position, at some row position and some column position. So what I can do is replace this rather than associating it with the row position and column position. What I can do is associate all of these values with a pair of vertices. So LUV refers to the, in some way it refers to the value of the matrix at position UV. The value here will be LUV.
Okay. And regarding the theorem you just proved for three vertices, so when we try to prove it for n vertices, do we do some like manipulation in linear algebra or is expanding the only
Yeah,
way?
you could do some linear algebra, but expanding is actually just fine. Expanding is honestly probably the faster way. And like this isn't some really annoying expansion. So
No,
because
like
of
if expanding is the only way, then how did someone come up with it?
uh yeah, actually if you will work with it a bit, this will feel fairly obvious because have you looked at say the handshake lemma that sum of degrees is
Yeah,
twice
yeah.
the number of edges? In some way it is very similar to that. Because yeah, it's not that hard to come up with honestly if you play around with it yourself a bit. Okay, so now going back to how we define this Laplacian, you'll notice that LUU is nothing but the degree of U, because for the adjacency matrix, the diagonal will have no value because we don't have such edges. And the diagonal will then contain the degrees. And in the Laplacian, for all the non-diagonal values, for some position uv, this is -1 if you have an edge uv, and 0 if you don't have the edge. So basically
How do
uv.
you obtain this formula which you have written in the first line?
Yeah, I this formula.
No, no, on the rightest slide. No, right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
uh
the first line formula.
yeah, this is just matrix multiplication, because this is like exactly matrix multiplication.
So like, how do you write these things so quickly? Like, how do you do this so quickly in mind? Is it like practice or some trick?
There's not much of a trick, honestly. It's you'll pretty familiar with it yourself if you spend some time on it.
Okay.
Now, so you'll divide this sum into say three parts. One is when sum over uv, sum over v. Ah, no. So if you divide into three parts, it will be something like xu square. This should be u. Then you'll have u summation v summation u, with the extra constraint that uv is an edge. And okay, and for the third part where uv is not an edge, this you're just multiplying by 0, and basically you you can just ignore that portion. And then this
So
will,
right now, are you proving that theorem or like?
yeah, I'm just proving this how I obtained this sum.
So you are doing it by linear algebra instead of expanding.
No, I'm just expanding here. Like you need linear algebra to define matrix multiplication here, but you don't actually use any linear algebra steps at this point. It's just normal algebra.
Okay.
Yeah. And what you'll notice is that this bit is nothing but 2 times summation of v in edge xu xv. And the 2 comes from the fact that it's a symmetric matrix, so the values across the diagonals are the same. So you end up adding the sum twice. I'll add another page. So ultimately, what you're left with is this is summation of uv degree of u xu square minus 2 summation of uv is an edge xu xv. And what you'll notice that this is exactly this thing, mainly because I'll work backwards. uv is xu minus xv square. This is nothing but uv is xu square minus 2xu xv plus xv square. And now this sum is fairly obvious where you're getting this from. As for this portion, remember how you defined the degree. It was the number of edges which are incident at that vertex. So xu square will be present in exactly degree u of the sum, and you'll get this. And I'm not adding a 2 for xv square is because your because like the handshake lemma, if you remember the sum of degree lemma, it has say it counts every edge twice. So I am actually counting when I sum these degrees, I am counting this edge twice, one from the side of u and one from the side of v. And ultimately you get this.
I didn't get this last point you made that counting
Mhm.
this twice. Like, where does
Yeah,
it matter?
so you notice that you have two xu squares here. Now, like a fairly obvious question will be, why is there no 2 here? The thing is, if you look at each degree, then this edge will first be counted once by degree u, and then again be counted by degree v. So if you add a 2 here, you actually end up counting each edge 4 times rather than when you should be counting each edge twice.
I didn't get you. Like, I think we count we like. Do you consider u comma v and v comma u to be different edges, or to be the same edges?
Yeah, you consider them to be the same edge. Yeah, so there it's not directed. So you actually so the edge does not have a direction associated with it. So the edge uv and vu are the exact same edge. So yeah, you ultimately get this nice sum. And in the next portion, we'll see why this is useful. Okay, so now I talked about eigenvectors, eigenvalues, and then I talked about a matrix. So it's natural for this talk to talk about the eigenvalues and eigenvectors of this matrix. Now, a nice thing you can show is that for any Laplacian, 0 will always be an eigenvector. Sorry, 0 will always be an eigenvalue. And for this, all you need to do is consider the vector which has all one values. So if you have say degree 1, degree 2, and so on, then you multiply this by 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. You notice that because of how we define degree to be the sum of edges to be incident on it, the value in each row and each column, if you sum up all these values, this is precisely 0. So there will be some -1 here, there will be some zeros here, some -1 here, and so on. This sum is precisely 0, and this sum is also precisely 0. And then what this multiplication does is just takes this one, multiply, you take this degree, multiply it by 1, you take this -1, you multiply it by 1, and each row ends up being degree u minus minus the number of edges, which is precisely 0. And then you get, and if and then like this matrix on, so on multiplying one, so on multiplying this matrix, sorry, so multiplying this all ones vector by L, you get the 0 vector, and that's just proves that it's 0 is an eigenvalue with the associated vector to be the all ones vector. Now again, this is say like a nice proof, but again, this tells you nothing about the graph. It's just some matrix, and all of this we worked with, just talked about the definitions. I'll sort of, so again, when you look back here, you get this, and then again, this sum will obviously be greater than 0 because it's a sum of squares. So what that really tells you is that 0 is an eigenvalue, and no negative number will actually be an eigenvalue, precisely because then lambda x square is nothing but lambda xt x is xt lambda, which is xt lx, and this is your summation of squares, and this is greater than 0. So if you ever have some eigenvector x, this associated eigenvalue will be, say, non-negative. So what that really means is that 0 is the smallest eigenvalue. Okay, so it's natural to ask, what about the second smallest eigenvalue? And that actually will be like the first result I'll show you, which connects this study of, say, eigenvalues to structural properties of the graph. You have this real nice result that the second smallest eigenvalue of L is 0 if an, oh, I wrote the opposite, is not 0 if and only if the graph is connected. So consider this graph. It's
I didn't
associated.
get the definition. Like the first smallest value is zero, so by definition, the second smallest value can never be zero.
No, no, no. So what you can have is, you have two independent vectors. Okay, both of them both of them have the same eigenvalue 0.
But from the previous slide, we know that the eigenvalue will be zero if all that xu minus xu will be zero throughout,
Yeah.
and that is possible if and only if that matrix is all one or like
See,
multiplied
yeah,
by
yeah,
one.
you actually are really close. That is actually not 0 if it's all 1. Sorry, all 0 is not the only case where it can be all 1.
No, no,
If the graph is, yeah, yeah, I get what you mean. So I wrote that eigenvalue is 0 if and only if all of those individual sums are 0, right?
yeah.
And what that means is that, yeah, so actually you're almost completely there to the proof, basically.
So is will it the special case will be when all the xu xv are all zero?
No, 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 no. Yeah, so actually, one nice point I think I didn't stress on. You add the extra condition that the eigenvector is not all 0, because if that were the case, everything would be an eigenvalue, and it's pretty useless in that case. Yeah, okay. So for a graph, the second smallest eigenvalue is not 0 if and only if the graph is connected. So for example, yeah. So now I'll give a proof of that. So you know that 0 is the smallest eigenvalue. And say you wanted some other vector x, which is not all ones, or say not all constant, because you can always scale a vector by some value and it will end up having the same eigenvalue. So if you have some vector x with eigenvalue 0, and this vector is not all ones, so basically Lx is equal to x. Oh, sorry. Lx is equal to 0, and xu is not equal to 1 for all u in V. In this case, what you'll notice is that xtlx, this has to be all 0. What that means is this sum will be all 0. Now, if the graph is connected, what that means is, if you have some edge uv, then this value can be 0 if and only if both of these, this has the same value c on it. So what you do is, you take some node all of its neighbor will have the same value c. All of their neighbors must have the same value c, and so on. Now, if this were the case, and okay, so what this ends up proving is that if you have some connected component of a graph, and this a single node here has a value c, all of its neighbor has a value c, and so on. So everything in this connected component ends up having the value c. And since this sum only talked about edge relations, you actually are free to choose whatever values you can choose for other connected components. So I'll write it a bit more clearly. Say you have some connected graph G. X is an is a vector such that Lx is equal to 0. This will imply xu is constant for all vectors. And like the proof is just LTX, xLTX is equal to summation of uv in u xi minus xv square, and this is 0. And this is all 0 if and only if xu is equal to xv for all edges. And what that means is if some vector has if some node has some value c on it, all of its neighbors will have the value c on it, and all of their neighbors will have the value c on it, and so on. And what you end up having is that the entire value graph has some value c on it, which proves this result. Conversely, if the graph has two connected components, this, what you can do is consider the vector which has all the values to be 1 here, all the values to be 0 here. And again, Lx, this is will be some 1 1 1 followed by a bunch of zeros. And if you go back to emulating the proof here, you notice that each vector has the number 0 on it, because these you can treat them as two separate graphs, and you'll get and you basically get the result.
But then for a not connected graph, the zero will be an eigenvalue infinitely many times.
No, you can actually try to prove this, that if if the graph G has k connected components, there are k linearly independent vectors with eigenvalue 0.
Is it at least k or exactly k?
Exactly k. And your construction is exactly the same as this. You just set it to be all ones to be in one component, then you set it to be all zero for everything else. And this manner you'll get k different linearly independent vectors.
Do you think that this linear algebra stuff helps occasionally in Olympiad, or maybe we should learn it later? If
Okay, linear algebra sometimes actually helps with the Olympiad, but spectral graph theory in specific, I actually have never done anything using that. And yeah, you can just study it whenever you have time. It's pretty fun, and like it can help you think of stuff in a certain way. And but like it's definitely not required for Olympiads, but it's pretty fun. Yeah, okay. So again, this is like what I wrote on the previous page, that if that has a eigenvalue with multiplicity k, if and only if it has k connected components. And now what I was calling the second smallest eigenvalue has a specific name, algebraic connectivity. And you will actually prove another result for algebraic connectivity. So for now we say bounded. You in effect proved a bound below that this algebraic connectivity is greater than zero for connected graph and zero for not connected graphs. You and will now bound it above in the next portion.
so, is there any nice geometric interpretation of this algebraic connectivity or not?
Geometric in what man? You mean in terms of the graph or in terms
I
of
mean, like
say?
someone could tell the algebraic connectivity by looking at the graph.
No, no, no. It's not really obvious. But the thing is, if you have some say symmetric matrix, there's some really standard algorithms which let you compute the eigenvectors and eigenvalues. So yeah, it's useful for hmm, it's useful for telling results for large graphs in particular, and say bounding some. So you have some, if you it satisfies to some property, it lets you bound other properties of other, say, more obvious properties of the graph, such as diameter and so on. This is actually related to like the longest path in the graph as well, but I won't cover it in this. Okay, so I'll talked about spectral theorem earlier. Now there's a very related theorem which I'll call like spectral optimization theorem. And this can be generalized to more graphs, but we look at say the real symmetric case. What you have is that if you have some real symmetric matrix M, then the Rayleigh quotient I defined earlier, its minimum value will be an eigenvalue, and the vector that actually minimizes this value will be an eigenvector. So, for example, yeah, yeah, I won't actually give an example. So, I'll just go right in the proof. So, for example, you had the spectral theorem, which tells you that there will be multiple vectors. I'll call them psi1 to psi n with eigenvalues lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda n. Now, what you can do is write any vector x as a sum of these values 1 to n. This is a vector, this is a vector. And now then just plug it in here. So you have xtmx and xtx. This will be xt m summation of ci I
Could you tell just once again where did we like use this XTMX upon XTX previously?
Previously we did not actually use it. I just defined it
Yeah.
in the start. Haven't used it till now, but we sort of
Yeah.
used it here. You just used it after scaling, in a sense, because there I'm dividing by the, say, the length of the vector, length square of the vector. And yeah, base summation xt summation ci lambda I by xdx at the page. So basically, I'll focus on this sum for now. XTMX is xt summation I is equal to 1 and ci lambda I psi I. And
What is this psi?
psi I were the eigenvectors which I talked about, which exist because of spectral theorem. And
But right now
again,
you are proving the spectral theorem, right?
no, no, so no, this is a spectral optimization theorem. So what it does is turns your spectral theorem into a theorem talking about maxes and minimums. Yeah. So what it says is that the value at which the Rayleigh quotient, the minimum value of the Rayleigh quotient, is actually an eigenvalue. And again, you multiply this out. What you notice is this is I summation j is equal to 1, say n ci lambda I lambda I lambda j transpose lambda ci and this c square, because yeah, just you just expand it out. And again, for I is equal to j, lambda I lambda ti is some number, but for lambda I is not equal to j, because of the orthogonal condition I mentioned, this is actually 0. So what this sum boils down to is summation ci square lambda I and this positive and this value. And similarly, the bottom is nothing but summation I is equal to n ci lambda I square. So this entire thing, ci square into lambda I, and like what you notice is this is just a weighted mean. So whenever, and so this will be minimized for, say, the minimum eigenvalue. Let me add a page. So what I basically proved was, if you have, say, eigenvalues lambda 1, lambda 2 up until lambda n, then there and the associated eigenvectors to be this. Then this sum will be summation of something square into lambda I. Mm, and again this something squared. And like this is a weighted mean and all the coefficients are positive. So if I say order these values, then this will definitely be, say, greater than lambda 1 simply because it's a weighted mean, so you can apply your whatever inequalities you want. And as we showed earlier that when x is eigenvector with value lambda, this thing is nothing but lambda, so equality is achieved as well.
But like this value on the RHS is like not dependent on x, right?
It is dependent on x. These coefficients that I chose has the dependence on x hidden. So this uh, dci square depend on x.
How did you define the CIs?
I defined the vector to be, say, sum of these vectors.
Uh, some of I didn't get you like.
So, for example, whenever I define some point, say 2, 3, 1 in real space, what I'm really doing is doing this, right? So this you're doing exactly the same thing here.
Okay.
Yeah. And
But
then
like this time there are a combination of the psi 1, psi 2, and how do you know combination of the psi 1, psi 2 will eventually lead to x? Like x is any random.
right, right. So what you have this result is when you have n orthogonal vector and say you're working with an matrix. What you have is if you have n orthogonal vectors and like your matrix ki dimension is n, you can always write it as a sum. This is again a linear algebra result. So for example, here you have three orthogonal vectors. So you can always write any vector as a sum of these three. And again, I really don't want to get into this because that's a whole another story. So yeah, the takeaway is that the dependence of x is here, and it is the mean of, and it's the weighted mean. So this will be greater than the minimum value, greater than or equal to the minimum value. And what you can do further is that I'll leave this. I won't talk about this because this actually is pretty easy to modify this proof to get to that one, and it'll take some time.
Which proof?
Uh, the proof of this theorem.
And this can be modified to prove which thing?
Yeah, I'm talking about that. This can be further modified to prove this. So what you have is, for example, earlier I took minimum over all vectors. What I do is I remove those vectors which are, say, now instead I say have these eigen vectors lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda n, and the associated eigen values is, say, increasing, non decreasing. Then the ith eigen value will actually be this minimum if you exclude, if you, say, don't consider these if you only consider those values which are orthogonal to these eigenvectors. So if you only consider, so lambda I will be the minimum over all x such that xi is 1 is equal to 0, xi is equal to 2 is equal to 0, xi dot I minus 1 is 0. This. So yeah, that's basically the result. And this will just be a slight modification to this previous proof. Okay, so now I earlier talked about, say, proving an upper bound on the algebraic connectivity. So, and I earlier gave like a sort of lower bound. Now I'll
What
give
was
this.
the lower bound?
Lower bound was just greater than zero if connected, and yeah, that was basically a lower bound, and zero if not connected. This upper bound will like again be another property in terms of graphs. So say you have some connected graph G. I removes I I take some set of vertices from here and I remove all these vertices. So you consider this graph G and you don't you no longer have these S values. Now, if this graph becomes disconnected, you will call S to be a disconnecting set. So, for example, you have this graph 1, 2, 3. Then 2 is a disconnecting set because once you remove 2, 1 and 3 are not connected anymore. Okay. Further, now I consider all these disconnecting sets.
I didn't get this removing two stuff.
Yeah, so here I consider this graph 1, 2, 3. Then I chose the vertex 2 and I removed it from the graph. So when I say remove it from the graph, I may remove the vertex, remove all the edges which are connected to it, and you'll be left with this graph. And this graph is no longer connected because there's no way to get from 1 to 3. So any such set of vertices that you remove which satisfies this property that on removing them it will become disconnected, you call that the you call that a disconnecting set. Now you'll define the connectivity to be the size of the smallest disconnecting set. So
So does this mean that connectivity is always a integer? Like it might be a
yeah,
real number. Like
connectivity is an integer because it's just a number of vertices, so it's guaranteed to be an integer.
no, but
Algebra.
like from the original definition of that
Right,
eigenvalue
right.
stuff, it
Wait,
seems that
wait.
it might be.
Yeah, so I am defining connectivity here, and that eigenvalue is called the algebraic connectivity. You call this the algebraic connectivity because you get it from, say, the eigenvalue stuff, and it is closely related to the connectivity.
So is the
These are two
algebraic
separate things.
connectivity not always an integer?
Yeah, it's not guaranteed to be an integer. It's I'll like send over an example if you want later. It's hard to come up with one on the spot. Algebraic connectivity is not guaranteed to be an integer, but connectivity will be. So I'll just take another example. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then you add these edges. Now, say I take 2, 4, and 3, and I remove all of them from the graph. This graph becomes 1, 5. So 2, 3, 4 is a connecting set. Sorry, disconnecting set. But if you notice here, if I don't remove 3, so I consider 2, 4, 3, 5. If I only consider 2, 4, and I remove these two vertices, the graph again becomes disconnected. But this, so yeah, 2, 4 is also a disconnecting set. So you define connectivity to be the size of the smallest disconnecting set. For this particular graph, uh, 3 is your disconnecting set, because once you remove it, there's no way to go from 1 to 2. So for this graph, your connectivity will be 1, because if you remove one vertex, the graph becomes disconnected. Now, yeah, you'll now we'll prove this result. Algebra Algebraic connectivity is bounded above by the connectivity of the graph. Again, algebraic connectivity need not be a integer. So consider, yeah, and to do that, you'll prove this theorem instead. And first, I'll just describe the theorem, the top. So say you have some graph G. You divide the vertices in two halves, say V1 and V2. Now consider the graph that you get if you only consider the edges which are part of V1. So for example, if you have this graph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, I'll just take the same example. And I chose V1 to be V1 is equal to 2, 4. And I then my H1 will be the graph which you get by only considering the vertices 2, 4. So your H is 2, 4. Now what we'll prove is that consider the algebraic connectivity of this. Call this lambda 1. You call the algebraic connectivity of this graph to be lambda. And what you'll prove is that lambda is less than lambda 1 plus the other vertices, plus the number of other vertices. And I'll first just see how this implies the second result. So yeah, so say you have the graph G. I have the vertices V1 and V2, and because of how you defined H will be all the vertices you get after, sorry, H is all the vertices you get after removing V2. And if this graph H it becomes disconnected, its algebraic connectivity lambda 1 will be 0. So what you will get is lambda is greater than V2 if removing V2 disconnects the graph. And what this basically say, lambda, the algebraic connectivity, is less than S if S is a disconnecting set. And what this means is lambda S is less than the minimum value of S. And you define this to be the connectivity. So yeah, yeah. Any questions at on this portion? Okay. If not, I'll move forward. Now, say okay. So now I'll just prove this previous result. What I have to show is that now say your H is the graph you get. H is equal to G. on removal of V2. And hmm, so this has some Laplacian, say LH, and LH, and there's some vector. I'll use Z. There's some vector Z such that LHZ is equal to lambda 1Z. And like I'll just point out that we define lambda 1 to be algebraic connectivity of H. What I'll do is I'll define another vector Z. This is Z. I'll define a vector, say Y from Z, such that YU is equal to ZU for U in V1 and 0 for U in V2. So again, you have this graph G, your partitions V1, V2. I'll just write down, I'll just copy the values Z, whatever was written there, and I'll have all zeros here. I'll add the extra constraint that ZTZ is equal to 1. I can do this is because I can always say multiply an eigenvector by any value. Now, basically now you look at, now you have this lambda. Recall that we proved that, okay, yeah, okay, okay. I'll say another thing. You have Z. This is orthogonal to the all ones vector. And this is true because of, spectral theorem said, because we know that all ones vector has the eigenvalue 0. And your spectral theorem said that whenever you have these eigenvectors, they will be orthogonal to each other. So this is 0. Conversely, this will, which implies that this will actually be 0 as well. Mainly because what you're doing is just appending some zeros to Z, and whatever value you'll multiply by 0, you'll just get a 0, and this sum doesn't change. Now, recall like the second theorem we proved. Second theorem I didn't prove, but I left. Lambda, oh, the second smallest eigenvalue, which again is your lambda. If you consider all the vertices which are orthogonal to 1, and you consider this Laplacian, the x, and this will be less than YTLG y by YT. And say this is true because, again, this is true, and say y satisfies this criteria, and we are just taking their minimum. Further, and like I added the extra constraint that this is 1. So this is nothing but YT LGY. So there's some UV, and this is just this value. So yeah, you'll now decompose the sum in three parts. You have this graph V1, V2. Now there will be some edges which cross over, some edges which start in V1 and end in V1, and some edges which start in V2 and end in V2. So first we look at these. This is not so. Yeah. So you consider y1 sorry, minus z square. This will nothing be 0 minus 0 square for uv in both in v2, because again that's how you define v. That's how you defined y. This is 0. Uh, for the values which just stay here, y1 minus, this is nothing but z0 minus zv square, where both u and v lie in v1. And finally, you consider this crossing values. This will be y. This will mm, this will be z u square for u in v1 and v in v2. Again, I just used how I define v here. So the ultimate result you get is this u minus yv square is equal to summation uv in v, where uv both lie in v1, zu minus zv square plus summation edge u, and u lies in v1, v lies in v2, z u square. Now you consider, say, the first sum, v1, v2. Right, so you consider the first sum, u in v1, v in v1, zu minus zv square. And this is nothing but just lt, lh, lz. Because, yeah, because this is precisely how you'll get the, yeah, because we earlier proved, we basically just used this earlier as well. Now you consider this sum, u in v1, v in v2, z u square. Now this, now instead what you do is you sum over all of these values. Now this is nothing but u, uv in a, u in v1, zu square. This will be summation of v2. You just remove this constraint. You just consider this v1, zu square. Now, if you recall here, we added the constraint that this their dot product is 0. And what you have, this is, this value is just 1, a sum of 1, and you get v2. So together, all together, what you got was lgx is less than lambda 1 plus v2. Alright, I did not. Plus ztlhz. If I now look at ztlth, this is precisely this, and this will, and because, say, we defined z to be the vector satisfying this property, so this will nothing this, so this will not be nothing but lambda 1. So what you end up with, this lambda is less than yt lh y, which is less than lambda 1 plus this. And yeah, that's your theorem. Any questions? Yeah, no, I can talk about adjacency matrix here, but I don't think I'll actually be able to explain them at all in 10 minutes. So if you have some, say, questions in some previous stuff I did, I think I won't cover the next stuff. So yeah, any questions or anything really?
Okay, if nothing's there, then I'll stop the record.
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks a lot for coming here and doing this. That was an amazing topic. To be honest, I was lost in the middle, so I'll go back
Yeah,
and
yeah. Oh, like, is